Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Jill Nustad and I chair the Department of Exercise Physiology. I have been asked to talk to you a little bit about the profession in clinical exercise physiology, and so that's what this piece is all about today. So clinical exercise physiology is actually differentiated from applied exercise physiology in that it is concerned with the relationship of exercise and chronic disease. The mechanisms, the adaptations by which exercise influences the disease processes, and how exercise can be used to prevent, to evaluate, to treat different chronic diseases. Probably the number one area that has been researched and where exercise has been applied is in cardiac rehabilitation. And so that's the number one area of employment really for clinical exercise physiologists. But it's not just limited to cardiac rehab. That model has been used and applied now to many other clinical kinds of situations and environments. So cardiac rehab, pulmonary rehab, bariatric, metabolic diseases such as diabetes, thyroid, arthritis, oncology environments, or working with people who have cancer. There are a lot of clinical conditions for which exercise is indicated. The focus again being more chronic kinds of diseases and conditions, and that is one of the ways we differentiate our services as clinical exercise physiologists from those of others in the healthcare professions. We're really working with chronic conditions and diseases. So that that idea, of course, that exercise plays a role in terms of treating and evaluating and preventing chronic disease is not a new idea. It's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, but the field of practice really just has been around since about the 1930s. It was something where researchers who were also runners started becoming interested in aging, in the aging process, and that's really kind of what started the clinical exercise physiology field of study. Sid Robinson from the 1930s. So at some time you should take a look at that history. It's kind of interesting. And then really in 1996, the Surgeon General's report, I can remember it pretty vividly because I was in the early years of my clinical career, and the Surgeon General's report came out with this statement that physical inactivity is detrimental to one's health. Physical inactivity is detrimental to one's health. And that statement connected, of course, physical activity and exercise with health outcomes. And since then, there's been a greater emphasis on clinical exercise physiology and differentiating that from applied exercise physiology. And again, there's just lots and lots of diseases and conditions for which exercise is indicated. We'll study that in CEP 520. So profession and scope of practice is something that we have been working on as a profession, clinical exercise physiology. We do have an organization called CEPA, or Clinical Exercise Physiology Association, which I challenge you to become a member of if you aren't already. It's very, very inexpensive for students, $15. For professionals, it's like $40 or $45 if you're an ACSM member as well. So very inexpensive. Become a professional member and get that on your resume. On that website, if you go to the Clinical Exercise Physiology Association website, you'll see definitions of the clinical exercise physiology and the scope of practice, all the environments that you can be employed in, and maybe a little bit even about licensure. Currently, there's just one state in our country that requires licensure, and it's the state of Louisiana. The scope of practice that is written into that particular licensure for that state has been criticized a little bit for being too narrow, but nevertheless they are the leaders, Louisiana, in terms of developing licensure for folks who are practicing clinically, and that's really a key. One of the requirements is a minimal of a master's degree preparation, academic preparation, and also having a certification by ACSM, either the RCEP, which is preferred, or I believe Louisiana will take the CEP, the Clinical Exercise Physiology certification as well. There have been several other efforts or movements, if you will, by other states. Minnesota and Wisconsin are fairly close to North Dakota. They have more of an organized effort going at the moment. Massachusetts, I believe, has something that's been written in terms of a law that's written, but it hasn't matriculated quite yet. California, Kentucky are other states that are more advanced in their movement towards licensure. So it's interesting, and I think licensure is probably coming our way. We get a little resistance when we make this move, as does any professional organization that is trying to achieve licensure. But because we are really one of the last health science professions to move towards licensure, we do have a little bit more resistance. We have to show that our services are not being provided by others, that we bring something different to the table, that our services, in terms of the safety of those who receive our services, are really needed by people with our specific kind of training. And so those are challenges sometimes, and it's of course a process. The CEPA organization does have a legislative committee. I'm actually serving on that committee, but the process, of course, to advance it is a slow one. It really is. But that's something that's happening in this profession, and it would be to your advantage, because licensure is usually associated with third-party reimbursement, and if insurance is going to pay for our services, then generally salaries are increased. So that could be how it might benefit you personally as a professional. But it really does need to be shown that our services are something that's needed, and it's different from what is currently being provided. So clinical exercise physiology, again, I would think always in terms of chronic conditions and diseases that exercise has been known to help prevent and treat. Some good sources, of course, of resources for information. The CEPA website, the Clinical Exercise Physiology textbook has some information, and I'm trying to think of some other areas. I guess you could go to these particular states and see what's going on in terms of their acts that they've put together for legislation. Hey, have a great day, and I hope there's something in this little blurb that is new to you, and maybe has served as a soup starter or hamburger helper, or something that's sparked your interest to go out and find some more information. Bye-bye.